Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to the first edition of Big Hairy News for this week. So good to be with you. Apologies we weren't here last night. Excuse me. Oh, that's good water. And it's good to be back with you for another night. I spoke to Chewy today. Chewy said he was still feeling pretty grotty and pretty scotty and pretty under the weather. So we never actually confirmed or denied whether Chewy would be in tonight, but I'm assuming he's probably not. Who knows? He may pop up at some stage if he feels up to it, but at the minute it's just you and me. Kia ora. Just us. Just you and me. Not even Nala, I don't think. No, Nala's not here either. How are you all? Hope you're doing very well. First thing I want to say is congratulations to Emma. Emma, is it Shriver? Who got herself a copy of Fear. Last week, all of you who either became patrons or made a super chat went into the draw for this here copy of Fear by Byron C. Clarke, which he has indeed autographed as well. Thanks for supporting BHN, it says. And he's autographed it. So, Emma, you need to get us your details. Probably the best way to do it is either message me on Facebook, go to the BHN Facebook page, or even just tweet at me. Is that what you say? Twitter me? Tweety me? Tweety me? Something like that. And we'll get some details off you and send that out to you. Super easy. Right. Hey, lots going on. Have you done your census, people? Tell me in the chat. Have you done your census? Did ours tonight. There are currently 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 of us. 7 of us. 6 of us. 7 of us in this household. So it was a bit arduous, actually. Not arduous like digging a ditch arduous, but arduous like doing lots of bits and pieces. But yeah, we got it all done, and the kids filled out all their bits, and we filled out all our bits, and I guess that's the end of it. I heard something interesting, though, in the news today. They were talking about, there was a really stupid question from a journalist, go figure, talking to the Minister of Statistics saying, if you don't reach 90% for this census, are you prepared to give up your job? And the minister went, absolutely. And the journalist went, so if it doesn't reach 90%, you're going to resign. I just so wanted the minister to say, who do you work for? It might have been Newshub. So Newshub, okay. So if your show doesn't rate 500,000 viewers tonight, are you prepared to give up your job? Funny that. How maybe you as a journalist wouldn't stand by what you're expecting me to stand by. Stupid question. Stupid question. But anyway, I did ours tonight, and hopefully you did yours at some stage. But the thing that surprised me was they're aiming for 90%. Now, 90% is a pretty good result when it comes to, research. But actually, when you think about it, if you don't do the census, it can be up to a $2,000 fine. It's a legal requirement. That therefore means if 500,000, I haven't even done the numbers, if 500,000 people don't do it, that would be 10% don't do it. 500 times 2 is that $1 billion? It's $1 billion. That's not a bad way to recover some of the, some of the COVID debt. 500,000 people choose not to do this, then things are in place, aren't they? Anyway, we'll see. So lots going on tonight. In fact, I've actually got, we normally have sort of 2 or 3 stories. We have 4 tonight. One of them is a couple of them are quickies, but I sort of wondered maybe it would just be you and I. And so we might get into them and have a look through them. So thanks for being with us. As you already know, there's Emma. Emma, congratulations. If you weren't here earlier on, you won yourself a book. So good to be with you. And you need to contact me privately, and we'll get that book out to you. You made a super chat, I believe, last week. I have to be honest, I just put everyone's name in a hat and pulled it out, and Emma's name was pulled out, and I think Emma did us a super chat during the week, which is very generous, Emma, because I think Emma is a young university student. So there you go. So message me on Facebook, Emma. Just go to the BHN Facebook page, or just tweet at me, and we'll connect and we'll get your details and we'll send something off to you. Whilst we're saying that, I guess it would be a good time for us to say thanks to all our patrons. So good to have you all on board. Thank you so much for being a part of what we do. You may think that your little $5 doesn't do very much, but honestly, like just being absolutely honest with you, it really does help sometimes when the other work gets a bit tighter and we need to pay for, this software that we use each month, or the Adobe package that we use each month, because we make clips and do editing and that kind of stuff, and it just helps. So we do appreciate all of you, and encourage you, if you want to get on board, if you like what we do, if you want to be a part of the team by supporting us, then you can do it by going to patreon.com/big hairy news. People often say to me, I would like to get involved, but I don't have a beard. The origins, and it might have changed, it might have evolved a little bit, but certainly the origins of the big hairy thing was always the idea of, you set yourself a big hairy audacious goal. You know that saying, a big hairy audacious goal? Well, it was always the idea of that, of a big hairy audacious news story. But yes, it does sort of appear that more and more of us who do things on the show do also have big hairy beards as well. It appears. Hey, really quick one to start off with, and to me, I kind of feel like this is a bit of a pointless story, but it is going to be a story, and it does seem to be making the news at the moment, and that's the idea that the government might run a referendum to lower the voting age. Now, if you've been a follower of the show, you'll know where we stand on this, where I stand on this. It's pointless because it's never going to pass, right? It's just not. They need a 75% majority in the House to lower the voting age for a centralized voting, so for vote for government, and it's just not going to happen. So I kind of feel like this is all a bit of a waste of time. It's maybe an interesting talking point. I mean, I don't. It's not that I don't support the idea of lowering the voting age. I'm not opposed to it. I just think it's a bit of a waste of time and a distractant, because even if it goes to I was going to say a census, it's in the brain at the moment, a referendum, it still needs to get through Parliament. There still needs to be a 75% majority, and it's not going to happen. So it's come up over the weekend, it's come up again, and it came up on the AM show this morning. There's a lot of stuff we're not covering from the AM show this morning because it's all lots of cultural stuff in there and questions about it. But I thought we would very quickly just touch into the idea of lowering the voting age. I mean, you're happy to share your thoughts. Would love to know what your thoughts are in the chat about it. I just think I try and fill my brain. I don't try and fill my brain with stuff that I then can't use, and this is a conversation that's never going to get past or never go anywhere. So I haven't given it too much thought, other than I'm not opposed to the idea. Certainly for the left bloc, lowering their voting age would be a positive thing. There's no question that people between 16 and 18 are more likely to vote left than right. But it's because it's not going to happen, I haven't really put too much time into it, but maybe you have. Maybe you've got some thoughts. Here on the AM show, they asked Chippy this morning about lowering the voting age. Oh, you're telling me this? See, this is what happens when Chewy doesn't come on board with me. I don't get to test my sound, first of all. Good Lord. Sorry, guys. I'm going to be 10 seconds while I reset something up. Thought we'd sorted all this out, people. I thought we'd sorted all this out. Talk amongst yourself. Yeah, Hipkins is silent. Maybe some people would like that. I'm going to share the screen again. I have to click another. Oh, it is clicked. Oh, hang on. Right, entire screen. That one there. Now share the audio. Now I'm going to play it again straight away, and you're going to need to tell me if it's working. And if it's working, I'll go back to the start of it. So here we go. Tell me if this is working.
Select committees looking at that. That gives the public an opportunity to make.
Here we go. Public an opportunity to make. So just tell me if that's working or good, and I will just scroll back to the start of this conversation, which starts at 11 minutes and 15 seconds. So we'll just go back to there and go to there and go to there. I'm assuming you all heard that little bit. I'm just wagering. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Apologies. We'll blame Chewy for that because he wasn't here to test it on. Here we go.
Comment in more detail on that right now.
Okay. Minister Wood said on the program last week that Cabinet was considering the voting age, would be considering it soon. Could there be a referendum on that in time for this year's election?
Look, Cabinet hasn't made decisions on that at this point. There is a process underway at the moment. The court has ruled that the current law, the current voting age, has not been justified by Parliament. There's now a parliamentary process that's underway where a select committee is looking at that. That gives the public an opportunity to make submissions and to have their say. That process hasn't reported back yet. So we haven't made final decisions on the best way to approach that.
Would it have to go to a referendum? That's what would be required for a change here?
Look, technically, there's two ways that you could change it. One would be a supermajority in Parliament, so a 75% majority in Parliament. It's clear that that's not available. The other would be a referendum. The government hasn't made decisions on which of those two options. If either, we would pursue.
Just very quickly, Prime Minister, are you a Harry Styles?
We don't care about Harry Styles. I don't think that's accurate as to what the PM said. It sounds very arrogant me saying that he's the PM and I'm not, obviously. But I don't think you can change it just based on a referendum, even a legally binding referendum, because it's a constitutional change. And I'm pretty sure for a constitutional change, you have to get sort of 2/3 or 3/4, whatever the correct number is, of Parliament to vote it in. If you could just get anything through via referendum, then that could lead to all sorts of havoc. So I think a referendum, even if legally binding, doesn't necessarily mean it's true. So I correct me if I'm wrong, correct me in the chat, but I think what Chippy just said about it's either a supermajority or a referendum, I don't think that's right. I think that has to be a supermajority no matter what. So really all the referendum would then do is telling us, it would tell us if people want it or not. It wouldn't necessarily actually make it law. JK also says binding referendum will make it hard for the Nats to vote against it. Yeah, I agree. There's a perception. I agree with that completely. There's a perception, but it doesn't mean if the referendum was to pass, therefore it becomes law. That's, I guess, what I'm saying. There's still a little bit to go from there. So, yeah, you're right though. I mean, if there was a binding referendum and it said, yes, we want to lower the voting age, and then that would look very unconstitutional or undemocratic should National vote against it. But I think enough people still would vote against it. I would only need about 30 MPs to vote against it. But look, my perspective on that, and I've talked to the guys who want to lower the voting age before, and I don't hate the idea. I don't love the idea. I'm sort of neutral on it. I'm not against it. I wouldn't fight hard for it. And I do think it's a bit of a distraction. And what you're going to see is it try to get used as a weapon against Labor. I've already heard some commentators talking about, they need this. They need some younger voters if they want to try and win. They need it. And obviously that's not the case. That's not true because they couldn't vote this time around anyway. But, I just think it's kind of chasing the dragon a little bit, just a little bit, because it can never become law. Well, it can, but it won't become law either way. So it's a bit of a waste of time. Right. We're going to move through some more conversation, and I'll apologize to you in advance because I will do my best to keep my eye on the chat. But when I'm also doing everything, sometimes I miss. Emma makes a good point though as well. What's the point of a referendum if 16 and 17-year-olds can't vote in it? Yeah. Very good. Have you heard about the new conspiracy station? Yeah, I have heard. I saw in the one of the New Zealand radio station Facebook pages, someone put up a link to it, and basically it was just covered with laughing. There's another one as well, run by the guys who start Family First. Family First? Yeah, that's right. Family First. Bob McCoskey and the crew who started up on Monday night as well. And I actually had a look at a little bit of it. And oh my God. So I'll say this again. Look, not to use this as a plug. You've got all these right-wing groups popping up trying to do what sort of the platform has done and the platform light is doing, right? You've got a group now called the Common Room, which has got Tim Wilson from TVNZ and a bunch of other people in there as well. You've got the platform. You've got these two other things, I don't even know what they're called now, popping up. And I literally heard on that Family First one, them talking about critical race theory is being taught in our schools. It's like, okay, if you're going to push your own stuff, at least just don't take stuff from America that literally is not being taught here. critical race. Like, it's not even being taught in university. What they're saying is there is a culture being taught in this country which emphasizes the harms done to Maori people, and they're now labeling that critical race theory. It's not critical race theory. It's something very different. So what I'll say again is, we're it. This is it. We're it. We're the only ones on this side of the political spectrum doing this like this. So that's why people should be getting behind us and helping push through what we're doing, because we're it. We're coming up to an election, and on the other side of the political world, they are popping up like frickin' zits on a 13-year-old. Same kind of content, actually, on these products as are within the zits. But we're it on the other side. So we need to amplify what's coming out of here. And I'm not saying amplifying me, I'm saying the content from here, when we have guests, when we have experts, when we talk the other perspective, it needs to be amplified, because we're it. No one else. The other side, there's zits all over the place. It's like a back full of zits, a oily back full of zits of right-wing propaganda. That's it. Very good, Mark. Very good point. See, Mark, that's why I'm a patron, Pat. Very good. Sorry, I feel a bit uncomfortable now about pushing it too hard. We'll leave it there. You got the point. Hey, let's have a look at Christopher Luxon over the weekend. He did his State of the Nation speech, which is sort of, it's sort of a piss take on the American version. I did want to talk a little bit about the lower to middle income families, $75, because, as a concept, I like it because it's very laborish. It's the kind of it's very Helen Clark working for families Labor light, and it's nice to see the centre right starting to drift left. Let's have a listen to a little bit of it.
And our plan will specifically target lower and middle income families to make their lives just that little bit easier. National's Family Boost childcare tax rebate will help 130,000 lower middle income families keep more of what they earn, with up to $75 more in their after-tax pay.
I'll say one thing. I don't think it's necessarily helping lower income. I haven't heard this yet. I can look into it. Maybe you can tell me in the chat if you've seen it already. Normally, these kinds of policies with National, NACT, don't include, for example, beneficiaries or people on benefits in general. So I don't know if this will be helping the lowest. But, it's a good left-wing policy. Thank you very much, Mr. Luxon.
Each week. And that's $3,900 every year, depending upon their income. Families will receive a 25% rebate on their early childhood education expenses, up to the maximum of $3,900 per year. And it is a targeted program that will be available to families earning up to $180,000, with the full $75 a week rebate available to those families earning up to $140,000.
$140K.
So just think about it. A young teacher and a plumber earning, say, $135,000 between them, who are spending $300 a week on childcare, would now receive a weekly rebate of $75, paid fortnightly by the IRD into the parent's bank account.
I guess one of the things National has to do, because they're not about sort of the right is all about, we'll just give tax cuts and then people can spend the money on what they want. I guess so they have to give it directly to the parents and the family. They can't give it to the ECE, because that would be contrary to their positions they've been making all the way through. Look, all in all, anything to help struggling families. I think it does got to 180,000, didn't he say, which wouldn't particularly be a struggling family. But I'm always been a big believer in general of setting thresholds higher rather than lower, like for tax breaks or for benefits you can get. Because the problem is when we set them lower, you always get that band in the middle who don't quite have enough to be able to cover everything they need, but earn too much according to where the band stops. So yeah, I'm not going to be critical of the thresholds being quite high, because I think in general, if I was going to err personally on the side of being more generous or being less generous, I would err on more generous, and this is a generous threshold for still giving some kind of a rebate. I also noticed, I think today on the platform, Brooke Van Velden, who we covered quite heavily last week with her comments around Tusiata Avia's poem, was talking to Sean Plunket about it, and Sean seemed quite interested about this idea. I wondered if it had anything to do with his major funders receiving $300 million a year of government subsidies for their early childhood education centres. I do wonder if any of Sean Plunket's perspective on this and being so, thinking it was such a good idea on his show had anything to do with the Right Family Foundation receiving such a lot of government money. Funny how the government money comes to the Right Family Foundation and then they give it to Sean, but he says we're not receiving any government money, even though it kind of comes through the foundation and goes to him. I guess it's a bit like saying, if I steal a DVD and I sell it to person A and you buy it off person A, I guess you could then claim you haven't received and stolen goods, couldn't you? I also wanted to cover off a couple of other things as well, because we're hearing as well the National Party at the moment with one of their tried and trues. It's like the greatest hits coming out again, talking about their 14,000 bureaucracies. It's the blowout of the public sector. So this is a press release, as you can see, from the National Party. Hipkins fix for consultancy blowout. Send a memo. Anyway, the part I wanted to read about this was the blowouts for consultants, which we're going to get to in a second, actually. Alongside spending blowouts to consultants, the number of bureaucrats skyrocketed by almost 14,000. I've said this to you guys before, and I'll say this again, right? I will always ask the question, what is the numbers, the whole numbers? Give us all the numbers, because it's the number of bureaucrats skyrocketed by almost 14,000. Now, that would only be a skyrocket if there was only one bureaucrat before. If there was 3 million bureaucrats, then it wouldn't be a skyrocket at all. It would be a very, very marginal and small increase. So it's important to know what those numbers are. And I think that's what the media should be doing and currently isn't. All of this might be understandable, says National, if this unprecedented explosion, right? So it's not just an explosion, it's an unprecedented explosion in spending and bureaucrats was actually delivering improved outcomes, but Labour has only taken New Zealand backwards. So what we have to do is find out how many bureaucrats are in New Zealand. Okay, this is from publicservice.govt.nz. The public sector, i.e. bureaucrats, employed around 448,200 people in 2022, 18.7% of New Zealand's total workforce, as measured by Stats New Zealand business demography data. So that's 14,000 out of 450,000. And if you actually have a look at some of these areas that people talk about, that Mr. Luxon talks about, there are areas where we've lost public servants. Ministry of Health lost 800-ish. Department of Corrections lost 600-ish. Ministry of Social Development lost 366, 314 for Oranga Tamariki. So you can see that lots of these government agencies have lost. Most have stayed pretty much the same, and then some have increased. For example, MBIE went up by about 600. But actually, when you look hardcore at the actual ministry offices, there's not 14,000 there. So you can't have National telling you it's all the bureaucrats in the government agencies, because it's not. So one actually wonders if it's the teachers and the nurses and the doctors and the people being paid to, where are the bureaucrats, quote unquote bureaucrats, that make up this 14,000? So let me make this clear for you before we go on. Christopher Luxon and National have been going on for over a year about a bloated public sector, with Labour adding 14,000 bureaucrats to it. But what does it actually mean? Right now, there are 448,200 people in the public sector. The new 14,000 bureaucrats equates to 3% of the total. So depending on how you use the numbers, what you could say is National is saying, in their opinion, remember this is what they're putting out there, Labour has got it 97% correct. Because if they're saying there's 14,000 and that's terrible, but that's only 3%, that means the other 97% must be all good, yeah? So we're happy with the 97, we're unhappy about the 3. So National is really concerned about the 3%. Now, if I was in government and my opposition was basically giving me a 97% mark, I would take that any day of the week. So as we've talked about before, stats, depends how you use the numbers. Nobody I've seen in the mainstream media has asked Mr. Luxon this question yet. Nobody. Mr. Luxon, this inflated public sector of 14,000 people, that's an increase of 3%. Are you therefore saying that if you got in and reduced it, you would have 97% the same number of bureaucrats as Labor currently has? Are you therefore saying that Labor's got it about 97% correct? No one's asking him that question. I don't know why. If I can go in there and find those answers in about 3 minutes, anyone can. Is it that they don't want to ask the questions? Is it that they they haven't bothered to look? I don't know why. But no one's asking him that question. 14,500 out of 450,000 is 3%. So Labor's off by 3%, and that's been 12 months of banging on to the public that they're off by 3%. Any one of us would take 97% in any test we've ever done in our lives. If they're 97% correct with their number of bureaucrats, what the fuck are they talking about? Come on, you people who have access. They won't talk to us. You people who will, ask the question. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the consultants. Yeah. Now, I don't have any exact answers for you, but on this same document that we were just looking at for where the spending's going, there is actually a section called contractor and consultant expenditure. And I thought this was really interesting. So this is more me just really giving you some information rather than, I don't have an exact conclusion because there's not a definitive answer here, but it is interesting to see how publicservice.govt.nz actually records the contractor and consultancy expenditure. In 2021-2022, public service organizations spent a total of 1.2 billion, I only said billion, million, 1.2 billion on contractors and consultants. This was an increase of 32% on the 2020-2021 spend of dollars, million, whatever, within the increase. And the increase was mainly driven by, this is the bit that I thought was interesting. So why? Because this is the question, Mr. Luxon. This is the question, mainstream media. Why are the numbers of kids out of school lower in the first 6 months of last year? Is it because perhaps that we were still living in a time for the first term of that when if someone in your house got COVID, everyone else had to stay away? Could that be the reason? We don't get the follow-up question by our journalists. We don't get the why are you saying this? Why are the consultancy's fees so high? Why? Not that they are, right? But why? You know, if I buy a Porsche for $300,000 and you buy a Corolla for $30,000, if I just say it's $300,000 and you think it's ridiculous, well, hang on, it's ridiculous anyway. But there's at least a follow-up to why would yours be worth that much money? There's a why, and no one's giving us the why. Well, here's a little bit of the why. It's not a definitive answer, but it's a little bit of the why. So the increase was mainly driven by, funnily enough, COVID-19, including the national vaccination rollout. Government priorities, especially big reform work programs, these included transitioning to a new national health service, health reform, overhauling New Zealand's building and land use planning system, RMA reforms, and improving the quality of our drinking water and the reliability of our stormwater and wastewater systems, 3 waters. There are also some costs associated with the Royal Commission into Abuse in Care. I'm sure if you ask Mr. Luxon, would you like to have those consultants taken off the Royal Commission into Abuse and Care? He's unlikely to say no, because that wouldn't be a good narrative. One-off IT improvement projects and upgrading systems for online access to government services. So that's for us, our online access to government services, and migrating legacy systems to cloud-based, which are more secure, resilient, and cost-efficient in the long term. So now when we hear, look, I said it's not a definitive answer, because that's not going to tell us exactly why all of the reasons, like all of the spending is. But we can look at this, that some of the reasons it was driven was because of vaccine rollouts and COVID-19, because of government priorities, including health reform, RMA reform, 3 waters, and a Royal Commission into Abuse and Care, and also improving the IT systems of the government to put them to a cloud-based system, which makes them more secure, and I'm assuming probably easier to access, especially for us, if they're on the cloud rather than in a hard drive sitting in Wellington. Again, you can use that information as you want, right? You can still look at that and say, well, I don't think consultants should have been paid that much for that kind of work. That's fine. But at least we now know why some of the consultants were there and why some of the reasons that there was more consultants used in that financial year than the previous one. And it's because there was more things done that hadn't been done or caught up on the year before. This story actually goes on to say other contributing factors to the year's expenditure included restarting projects that were put on hold during the pandemic, and the tight labor market with the country's borders not fully reopening until the middle of this year. So in other words, if you spend $100 a year on fuel, right, and one of the years you only drove your car for 6 months, that means you only spent $50. But next year you needed to make up the miles and you spent $150. You'd look back and go, shit, why is there a 300% increase in fuel? And that's because, like, during your car's lockdown, when you didn't use it for 6 months, right, then there was no expenditure there. Therefore, when you had to go and do all that same work and cover those same miles in the following year, you had more to do and it cost you more. Not giving consultants a pass. Let's make that clear, right? I'm not saying government can spend and waste as much money as they want on consultants. I'm saying when they say there's too much money being spent on consultants, we need to say why. And we need to say, where's it being spent? When they say there's 14,000 more bureaucrats, we need to say why. We need to say out of how many. And we don't seem to be getting people doing that additional level 2, level 3 conversation. And look, we're just a little pissant broadcast sitting in Dunedin drinking water. Sorry, I'm ranting. We may get some of the politicians on later this year, because they may find our audience wanting to get to. But the reality is, and look, it's no criticism of if I mention any names, but it's the Jack Tames and it's the Tova O'Briens and it's the I don't know. They're the only two names that come to mind. It's the Jessica Mutches, and they're the people that need to ask these questions. One, so we can see them, but two, because they have a much bigger audience to find out the answers for. All right. Now, I'm assuming, actually, and I already know because I've had some messages from some people, where the hell's my mouse gone? There it is. That many of you will have seen the Jon Stewart clip over the weekend. Jon Stewart talking to Senator Nathan Dahm, that's probably how you pronounce it, on gun reform, gun control, and what the GOP is doing with their messaging at the moment. I'm going to play you a good portion of this. I'm not going to play the full 9 minutes, but I'm going to play you two portions of it. And then we're actually going to go and have a look at two old men shouting at clouds, because it kind of relates to part of this conversation. So Senator Nathan Dahm was on with Jon Stewart, and we pick up the conversation with the senator talking about being a Second Amendment advocate. And Jon Stewart does something fairly brilliant here. Okay, so Jon Stewart basically asks why. Like we've been talking about with journalists in New Zealand. Jon Stewart's not a journalist, he's a comedian, commentator. But he asks the why questions. And he says, but those things don't link. He basically says a version of, but Mr. Luxon, that means that 97% of the bureaucrats are okay then. So it's only off by 3%. He goes a bit further. So let's have a listen to some of this conversation. If you haven't seen this yet, you are going to love it.
I'm a strong proponent of the Second Amendment. I believe the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's the one right that's listed in the Constitution that uses that very specific affirmative language, shall not be infringed.
It's also the one right that uses the phrase well-regulated.
Correct, when it's talking about the militia and the state.
By the way, just for clarity's sake,
yeah,
I'm not against the Second Amendment. I don't want to ban guns. But you're saying more guns makes us more safe.
Yes.
Yes.
So when we got 400 million guns in the country.
Beautiful question.
We had an increase and gun deaths went up. So when exactly does this curve hit?
Beautiful question.
That takes it down. Would 1 billion guns do it?
Let's just run those numbers, 400 million, 50.
Okay. No, first of all, doesn't answer the question. Beautiful question, Jon Stewart. So more guns makes us safer. When is that going to start to happen? The senator doesn't ask the question. He, in fact, just starts to talk about, well, it's just a few dead people. I'm paraphrasing.
1,000. You're talking about a less than a fraction of not even 1%, of 100th of a percent.
But it goes up, not down. So your argument is backwards.
But if you...
And his argument was, when are we going to see the increase? When are we going to see more guns being safer? His answer back was actually, yeah, but it's just a few people. That actually was his response.
Well, okay, so let's come up with a solution. Okay, so one of the issues, a contributing factor, again, I believe it's the individual that is the problem.
So your solution to that is give them more guns.
Oh, he's good.
So I'm saying that because people are the problem, we need to look at the problems that those people are facing and how do we address it.
But you've removed the ability for the state to do that.
No, because you're...
If you don't have background checks and you don't have registration and permitting, how do you know who has a problem in terms of the people who you're giving a gun to?
You want to talk...
Exactly. So he's saying it's something wrong with the people, and Jon Stewart saying, yeah, but you're not checking the people. So if it's something wrong with the people and you're not checking the people, you're still not solving the problem. And this is another deferral. It goes away from it and doesn't answer the question.
Talk about the background checks first, or do you want to talk about solutions first?
I want to talk about what you're doing is you're bringing chaos to order.
That's your subjective opinion, that it's bringing chaos to order.
It's not my subjective opinion. We have 50,000 gun-related deaths. That's not a subjective opinion.
Okay, so
that's dead people. Let me back up for a second. In every other place in your life, you want to bring order, but guns are the outlier for you. So let's start with immigration. You want registration, maybe a wall, maybe not a wall. Why do you want that?
Well, one of the reasons is because the fentanyl crisis.
Right.
I mean, okay, but
you don't know when it's coming across. So what do you do?
The fentanyl crisis is twice what the gun death crisis is.
Okay, so until the gun crisis gets to the fentanyl level,
not until it.
You don't want to bring order.
No, not until it. But
do you see my point?
If we're going to talk about protecting lives, that's a larger issue in America than guns is. If we're talking about individual lives of ways that they can be protected, loss of life.
I actually would almost guarantee it's not a larger issue. I think historically speaking, if you added up all the people killed by guns in America and all the people killed by fentanyl, I would wager almost any amount that the number killed by guns is hugely bigger. It may not be every year at the moment, but overall, I wager it's a much bigger issue.
Life in America. There's loss of life through fentanyl. There's loss of life through obesity. The obesity crisis in America costs 6 times the number of lives as guns.
Right, and so, you're the guy saying, you know what would help this? Ice cream.
No. So you know what would help the problem that we're facing with firearms?
What?
The fatherlessness crisis that we have in America. If you look at the statistics. Right.
Yeah, they're dying from gun deaths.
80% of school shooters either came from a broken or fatherless home.
So you would say no guns for fatherless homes?
No, that's not what I would say. I would say...
So he's identified the problem, which is fatherless homes. Take that for whatever you want. Jon Stewart gives an incredibly accurate, clear, clever response, which is, okay, so if the problem is fatherless homes, no guns in fatherless homes. And of course he's going to say, no, of course they can have guns. So what he's going to try and now do is say that the problem is a social issue, but but how can you legislate against fatherlessness? What, you're going to cancel divorce? You're going to make people live with ex-partners so there's a father in the home? It's something you can't legislate against. So on one level, it's utter horseshit. On another level, it's a brilliant piece of politicking from the right, because what can you do about it? You can blame it as a problem, but you can't solve it as an issue.
Say that fathers need to be more engaged.
Great. So let's
with a firearm if they don't have a father in the home.
Let's put more resources into areas that are poverty-stricken. All for it.
And into fatherlessness. And that's something that we're doing.
But why with guns are you against bringing order?
I'm not against bringing order.
You are. You're also making it less safe for cops and for people. When the police go to a domestic call, it's the most dangerous call they can go on.
Brilliant comment coming.
In your world, if they knew that there were firearms in the house, that's a safer call. Is that what you're saying?
No, because police...
Because why?
Because police treat every situation as a potential issue.
But more guns makes us safer. So why don't, when the police go to a house filled with guns, why don't they breathe a sigh of relief knowing that this Second Amendment that shall not be infringed is being exercised so fruitfully in this home?
Are you familiar with the 39-year-old woman in New Jersey?
I'm familiar with a ton of anecdotes.
Yeah,
I'm asking you a simple question.
This is not an anecdote,
When
John.
the police
actually
go to a house,
she had a restraining order on her ex-boyfriend.
I can run through hundreds and hundreds of examples of women killed by their domestic partners by guns that were not taken away through the lessening of red flag laws. You're pivoting
But the
to
knives-
anecdotes.
No, this is not anecdotes.
What the police say, if we had gun registration, if we were able to track purchases, they have a technology that every bullet would be stamped with an individual like a fingerprint.
Wow.
If we had an ATF that wasn't defunded, we would be able to enforce gun laws more effectively, and we would be able to solve gun crimes more effectively. You're against all of that.
Because the person is the threat, not the firearm, not the knife.
I get it.
The person and the individual is the one that is the concern
Great,
here.
but you don't want anything that could help law enforcement or society determine whether or not a person is a good guy with a gun or a bad guy with a gun.
Right. Now, amazing. Like, amazing. Like, even if you don't like Jon Stewart, if you're like, oh, bloody lefty liberals. Let me say this as well. If you've seen this clip, maybe what you haven't seen is the follow-up that I'm going to show you, because I've got Mr. Dahm's follow-up. He made a statement to the press after this came out, so I've got that for you as well before we go. Yeah, I noticed that as well. People in the chat saying that he doesn't know what an anecdote is, because he goes, no, this is true. And it's like, that's not, an anecdote is true. It's just we say it all the time, your anecdotal evidence may not be representative of the data. It's a little saying here in BHN. But look, this is brilliant. And I remember watching Jon Stewart when he was doing the Daily Show, and he had Al Gore on, and he said to Al Gore, because the Daily Show was quite a reliable place to get quite accurate news. Yeah. For you youngsters out there that may not remember Jon Stewart in that role, it was pretty groundbreaking. And he had Al Gore sitting in front of him, and he said, why are we asking these questions? Meaning, he was saying, why aren't the journalists, the people with access, why aren't they asking the questions? And Al Gore's response to him was really clear. He said, the only person that could ask the king the real question or speak truth to the king without fear of getting their heads cut off was the jester. And you think about that context, and you think about what can happen within comedy and from comedians, and this is it. I mean, Jon Stewart doesn't give a fuck about getting access again to Senator Nathan Dahm. This is the moment. This is the conversation. This is it. He's done. Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, all those places, they need these guys to come back. They need them to come back. That's their model. They need to run their advertising, and so they can't be the jester. So all those organizations, you probably see it in New Zealand a bit as well, but all those organizations, they're fearful of having their heads cut off. So I want to play this last bit as well, because this last bit leads into something we're going to talk about with two old men shouting at clouds as well. Second part of this conversation is Jon Stewart makes, again, remember the big thing about the right wing and the Second Amendment is the freedom to own guns, no matter what. No restrictions, no nothing. And so they've just gone through a conversation where Senator Dahm has said that if you had to register to own a firearm, that would be an infringement on your rights, right? If you had to register to own a firearm, that would be an infringement on your Second Amendment right. That's the point that the senators just made. Jon Stewart takes on from that point.
Is voting a right?
It's a right for citizens, yes.
Do you have to do anything to do it?
Yes.
What do you have to do?
It depends on the state.
What do you have to do?
Sometimes you have to be at least 18 years old.
What do you have to do?
And
Keep
in some
going.
places you have to have a government issued ID.
What do you have to? You have to
You have to be on the voter rolls.
register. You have to register. So you have to register to a right. Is that an infringement?
Does the right to voting say shall not be infringed?
Oh, so this is just a semantic argument now.
No, it's not.
You believe voting rights can be infringed because it doesn't say specifically shall not be infringed.
Is it an infringement upon a 17-year-old's right to vote, since they don't have that right to vote?
No.
Oh, it's not an infringement on them?
No,
Okay.
absolutely not.
Why not?
Because you're the one making the argument, not me. I'm saying even rights have responsibilities.
Just quietly, and as an aside, I think it probably is technically an infringement on a 17-year-old's right to not to vote based on their age. But that's when you come down to, I guess, legal discrimination versus non. And so I think maybe It is an infringement on that 17-year-old, but it doesn't negate the overall point, just for clarity.
And that within those responsibilities are responsibilities and order, otherwise it's chaotic. I'll go you one further. You want to ban drag show readings to children.
To minors, yes.
Why?
Why?
What are you protecting?
Why can we prohibit children from voting, those under 18 from voting?
Why are you
but
banning
also that?
Is that free speech? Are you infringing on that performer's free speech?
They can continue to exercise their free speech, just not in front of a child.
Why?
Because the government does have a responsibility to protect.
I'm sorry?
The government does have a responsibility in certain instances to
What's
protect
the
children.
leading cause of death amongst children in this country? And I'm going to give you a hint. It's not drag show readings to children.
Correct, yes.
So what is it?
I'm presuming you're going to say it's firearms.
No, I'm not going to say it like it's an opinion. That's what it is. It's firearms. More than cancer, more than car accidents. And what you're telling me is you don't mind infringing free speech to protect children from this amorphous thing that you think of. But when it comes to children that have died, you don't give a flying fuck to stop that, because that shall not be infringed. That is hypocrisy at its highest order.
Brilliant, 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 brilliant. Yes, and that is, as we've talked about previously, what we talk about when you have culture wars. When the right are more concerned about, we're going to talk a bit about drag shows shortly, because it comes up in the next conversation. But when they're more concerned about the heart, it was just such a, the saying hoisted by one's own petard. I didn't know what that was until about 5 years ago. And I found out that a petard is actually an explosive device. And it literally means in ancient times, a long time ago, that people would try and place these explosive devices and they would go off accidentally sometimes. And so they'd be blown up. They'd be hoisted by their own petard. And what that means in a context of today is we go, you're basically, you're being caught by your own argument. And as soon as he says the government needs to protect, and Jon Stewart goes, excuse me? Okay, perfect. We agree. The government needs to protect children. What's more important to protect them from? Someone in a dramatic costume reading a story in a library, whether you think that's good, bad, or indifferent, but which is more important, or a Glock that can shoot 14 rounds in a classroom, which would be more important to protect a child from, especially in America, like the shootings. I mean, it's kind of a bit of a foreign conversation here, but which is more important? It's just utterly brilliant. It's well done. It's utterly brilliant. And look, I can't keep up with the text, and I apologize in advance, but I'm sure many of you, you're all going for it. You're going for it. I wanted to share with you the last bit, because the senator has been spoken to after this conversation, and he has come out of it. You would think maybe he was going to find a way to come out of it, but he has not. It was absolutely a clinical definition of not answering questions. So this is what he said when ABC's Newton Late caught up with him. He said, I expected to be shown in a less than positive light, but I tried to take the opportunity to provide people with the truth. How they choose to use it, that's up to them. People on the left will say, Jon Stewart eviscerated me. That's what they're saying. People on the right will say, he interrupted you every time you tried to answer a question, or he's a bully. So in other words, people on the left are saying, he took your arguments apart and he devastated them to a point of you being eviscerated, right? People on the right are saying, he was a bit mean. So even in his response, he's saying, the responses I'm getting is this group of people are saying that my subject matter, my content was taken apart. These people over here were saying, well, didn't have many manners, did he? And a part of this, which I like most of all, and I don't know how much to buy into this. He said those Dahm, whose Twitter bio asserts he's Oklahoma's most conservative state senator, told Tulsa ABC's Newton Late that he took the interview because he's quote not afraid of anyone or anything, right? And then all the people on the left said, your opinions were taken apart. All the people on the right said, he doesn't have many manners, does he? So even as a response, he didn't make up much ground on that response, to be perfectly honest. Anywho, brilliant piece of broadcasting from Jon Stewart. And when you look at people who have been journalists for such a long time, have so much access, when you say you guys need to learn from this comedian, I don't know what entirely it is, the world that we live in. All right, we are going to have a chat with, we're not having a chat, we're going to have a chat about Savage Colonizer, Tusiata Avia's poem, and Winston Peters' perspective on it. Winston Peters went on the platform, and there was like a 3 or 4 minute introduction to this piece where Sean Plunket went on and 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 on about not getting access to people. Look, we don't get it. I mean, platform's much bigger than us, right? No problems. They don't get access to people. Lots of us don't. The problem is he sounds it like they're not talking to anyone, which is not true. Because I've heard the head of Creative New Zealand on News Talk ZB. There are people who are talking to some places. They just won't talk to Sean Plunket. And I think that's fairly obviously why. So he does this big, long setup to this poem, and he gets into Mr. Peters' conversation. And the first thing he asks him is, has he read the poem, right? He's come on to talk about this poem, right? That's the first thing. And he wants to know if Mr. Peters has read the poem. And that's where we shall pick up the conversation.
Good morning.
Have you read the poem?
No, I haven't read the poem. I've read all about it, but I've not read the poem. I don't intend to read that doggerel and that rubbish.
Oh, please, can I play it for you again? So Mr. Peters has come on to talk about this poem and how bad it is for society, but...
No, I haven't read the poem. I've read all about it, but I've not read the poem. I don't intend to read that doggerel and that rubbish.
And as you can understand, and I'm sure you're with me on this and you already get it, is that they're now going to spend 10 minutes talking about the poem. This is the poem that...
No, I haven't read the poem. I've read all about it, but I've not read the poem. I don't intend to read that doggerel and that rubbish.
Yeah, but they're going to offer really insightful opinions on what the poem is about, what it says, and what it means, even though...
No, I haven't read the poem. I've read all about it, but I've not read the poem. I don't intend to read that doggerel and that rubbish.
So let's keep going with the conversation. Now that we know he hasn't read it at all, let's hear all his well thought out positions and opinions about said piece of art.
Because that's what it is. And my concern is that the taxpayer has been paying for it. And this comes at the very same time as that terrible death happened in Auckland, where a 14 and 17-year-old stabbed a man to death after a minor traffic accident. This is awful stuff at the moment.
Mr. Peters is equating a piece of art, a poem, to a murder, right? And he's trying to do cause and effect. Unbelievably. This man was a lawyer.
And it shows that in some ways our country's going mad quickly.
Are you saying the two events are linked, or we might say one is causative?
Well, the fact is, when you're prepared to say that sort of thing, running around with big knives to stab...
Hang on. Say what sort of thing, Mr. Peters? Say that sort of thing. But hang on. What did the poem say?
No, I haven't read the poem. I've read all about it, but I've not read the poem. I don't intend to read that doggerel and that rubbish.
Right. Yeah, but when... Sorry, we'll let him go on. When it says that sort of thing, what?
Stab people, as though it's justified on your analysis of history with respect to Captain Cook and his ancestors, who don't happen to be us, because many of us are not English in our background. We're Scottish or Maori or something else. So you've got all this linked in mindless sort of latent sense of nationalism coming from somebody who herself is not a native New Zealander in that context, rammed down our throat and being paid for by the taxpayer.
Bloody migrants, Winnie. It's those migrant. How dare they? How dare they have an opinion on James Cook, who didn't just go to New Zealand, but went all over the Pacific? But how dare they make a piece of art about someone who went all over the South Pacific, into all the Pacific Islands and colonizing? How dare they?
It is a waste of our time. Look, I'm from freedom of speech, but when you're inciting people to violence of this type, that's something else.
And they all do it, don't they? They all have to say, I'm for freedom of speech, other than when it's not my speech or anything else like that. Because remember, his insightful look at this poem and the content of it comes from a place of, How can I word it?
No, I haven't read the poem. I've read all about it, but I've not read the poem. I don't intend to read that doggerel and that rubbish.
Yeah. Sorry. So that's the position it's coming from. I want to play one more part as well, because it links back in a little bit to the conversation with Jon Stewart about drag queens. I'm not entirely sure how they get there. It's like Plunket just goes, oh, hang on, let's put another culture wars point out there, because we've got Winston here and he seems to be reactionary. There's a couple of things he's talking about. That's not the first point that's made. Let's just go on with the other part of this conversation.
Yeah. And while I've got you here and we're talking about what is art and what's performance or not, what do you think of drag shows in public libraries?
So he's going to ask him about that, and Winston Peters doesn't know what he's talking about. Like, he completely doesn't even really know what's been going on.
Drag queens reading stories to kids.
Well, it's ridiculous. It's terrible. And what you've got here is people without any authority from the parents, who after all should know what the kid's going to be hearing next, without any consultation, just ramming it down our throats.
Well, I have to correct you there, Winston. These things are advertised as drag queen story times, so parents can choose to bring their kids along. It's not like they're just, well, I hope they're not just popping up in schools unannounced.
Well, a lot of parents did not know what was happening next. But that's not the truth. I mean, everything is happening at the moment. And for example,
he has confirmed the narrative I wanted to put out there. So now we can go with that. Sort of like Fox News does this thing where the morning shows will say something, then the afternoon shows will say, some people are reporting, and it's like, actually, they reported it. So now Mr. Plunket, Karen can go, some people are saying that they're just popping up because Winston's just said it.
An older lady I know was in open hospital the other day and found out the card, so this is a European person, has her name and under it Wahine, right?
Yeah.
This is language about 5% of the country speak with any proficiency and 95% don't. But then at the open hospital, everything up there is in Maori first. Even systems that are about saving lives have it in Maori, the Maori pictures, the Maori imagery.
So did you get that? The pictures, the imagery is in Māori. I'll say it again. The pictures, right, on the emergency things and the images are in Māori. That's just what Mr. Peters said. I say it again. The pictures are in Māori. What does that actually mean? What it means is he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's looking for a cultural war relevance that he can push down the Blue Rinse Brigade's throat, fill them with fear, and try and get back into Parliament. The pictures, the images are in Māori. What are you fucking talking about? Play that bit again.
There's in Maori first. Even systems that are about saving lives have it in Maori, the Maori pictures, the Maori imagery. And if you can't follow that, just too bad.
Yeah.
Now, who is deciding all this stuff and how they're getting away with it? And I have to tell your audience, I'm sure you tell them every day, you've got to get off your backside and do something about it.
Yeah.
So that's why I said two old men shouting at the clouds, because that's kind of what it comes across as. There's no real substance behind anything has been said there. I mean, if Mr. Peters did have some kind of view on the poem, it would be interesting. But of course,
no, I haven't read the poem. I've read all about it, but I've not read the poem. I don't intend to read that doggerel and that rubbish.
Yeah, because why would you? I mean, why would you read something, try and get the context of it, try and understand the perspective of the artist to offer commentary on it, rather than just, I've heard some things on the platform, or I've heard some things on David Farrer's blog, or I've heard some things from Whale, and that's enough for me. I'm going to comment on it from now. I don't know where Mr. Peters has heard anything, but he hasn't read the poem. But he's got a lot of opinions about the poem. He should watch us. We played the poem in its entirety. Oh, where did that go? Here we go. Winston didn't need to translate Wahine to Plunket because we all know what it means. Very good. Very good. Oh my God, he's just horrible. Wish he'd retire from public life. Bloody Winston. Yeah, there's one. Go check out a Welsh A Welsh hospital boy. Oh, yeah. It's. I've been thinking about this phrase to do with Winston Peters. I probably shouldn't use it. The second, the first part is uncle, because there are a lot of people asking about Winston Peters and, is he self-loathing? I think Winston Peters. I've spoken to Winston Peters several times. I have to say, Winston Peters, as an interview, it's great fun. He's fun, but as a public figure who has a chance to make the world better or worse, he makes the world so much worse. He's very, very clever at what he does, and he's very clever at finding a touch point and getting himself elected to Parliament, and then taking the baubles of office, even though he promises not to. And for a long time, it's been immigration, and you would have heard there was a tried and true in there. And a long time, it's been things like retirement age. He did a beautiful thing a couple of elections ago when he was rallying against the retirement age going up and talking about how it would affect retired people. Yeah. And of course it wouldn't, because it was floated as a plan for over the next 20 years. And I was actually like, the thing I realized that Winston did so brilliantly was he used it to scare his Blue Rinse Brigade into voting for him. What he should have been doing is talking to people like me, because I was the person who in 20-ish years from then would have been impacted by it. But he managed to spin it as a current issue, not as in something for 20 years from now. He's very, very clever at what he does. But someone says he should retire. I think the public has spoken. I would be very surprised if he got back in, because I think you'll find people will be fearful. Like, there'll be hardcore New Zealand First voters, 1-2% completely. And then there'll be a group of people who will probably not want to see Labour back in, but they know that Winston, because and it is my honest hell belief, Winston is about Winston, and he will do whatever is best for Winston, that he could well go with Labour should that be able to feather his own nest. Now, even though I think that's unlikely, there'll be enough, because he's done it before, there'll be enough people who will go, well, a vote for Winston could be a vote to get Labour back in, and I think they'll drift towards national. So I think he won't get national voters, and he certainly won't get Labour voters, where in the past he's been able to span that middle a little bit. So I think he's probably done, although all of us who do this game have been wrong before, and we will be wrong again. Now, I did put it up as we went through, but thank you, Kim, for the super chat. We appreciate that, and good to have you on board, and thank you very much for your $2 super chat. We do genuinely appreciate it. Yep, Kim saying it there. His last life was going into coalition with Labour. He's so Lord Nelson. That's pretty good, actually. He is very Lord Nelson. Give it a decade, and no one will be alive to vote for him, assuming he lasts that long. Well, he's doing pretty well for himself. He lives he has in the past lived a pretty hard smoking and drinking life, and he's doing pretty well. You got to say, he looks pretty good. When it comes to actually his presentation, he's a good looking age for what he is, man age. Sorry, time for me to get off Winston Peters and how good looking he is. Thank you so much to our patrons. We very much appreciate you having on board. I didn't mean to turn part of tonight's broadcast into a hard sell to you guys to actually get on board. But as I said, there's at least 4, if you include the platform, sort of right-wing conspiracy / alt-right broadcasts that have popped up in the last 12 months. There may be some other ones out there that advocate from the left like we do, but there's no one else who does it like what we do. No one else who says, 4 or 5 nights a week we'll be here with you. So if you enjoy what we do, if you've been on board for a while, if you've been a lurker, as some people say out there, then come and lurk no more. Come and join the whānau. Come and be a part of the team that puts together Big Hairy News, and help us do it for the rest of the year. It would be great to be able to get through the year and be seeing you guys at election time and the prequel to election. But all of our patrons that are on there right now, we thank you for your patronage, and we look forward to continuing to do this. And Chewy, if you're watching, mate, get well. We hope you're well. I hope you're getting better. We were both sick yesterday, something completely different. Chewy's got the flu, got the cold. Someone in the text asked about COVID. I understand it's just a cold. That's what Chewy's told me. And I don't know if some of you may remember, but several weeks ago I had an incident where we weren't quite sure whether it was a chest thing or a torso thing. And it ended up that I just had, like the doctors are like, probably just indigestion. I'm like, what are you talking about? And it flared up again yesterday. And I've never been in so much pain before. Well, I probably have, but I couldn't function last night. So I didn't. And I think probably what it is, really, really honestly with you, I think I've just given up drinking various acidic soft drinks. I reckon that's what it is. I reckon it's damaged the lining of my stomach and perhaps my intestines. And probably what happens is people say indigestion. It doesn't sound like much. My guess is it's probably an inflammation of the, I don't know, one of the intestines, and that's causing the pain. That's what I think it is. And so, yeah, you've probably seen me several times drinking various black liquid, which I love. I think it's gone. I think I've had to definitely give it up, and we'll see if that fixes the problem, because we don't want this thing recycling. So anyway, just before we leave.
Now, I haven't read the poem, I've read all about it, but I've not read the poem. I don't intend to read that long and that rubbish.
Last word to Winston, I guess. Hey, thanks for joining us again, guys. Really appreciate your time tonight. Back again tomorrow night, 9 p.m. for another edition of, yeah, Kooky, thanks for that. I was thinking that as well, but let's not go there, eh? Let's not go there. I will be back again tomorrow night. I don't know who'll be with me. We'll see. Also, just a little reminder, if you have any interest whatsoever, is that we released the latest Let's Talk Funny. I should have had this queued up. See, I don't really know what I'm doing in this show. I just kind of do things to do things. Don't really know what I'm doing. Latest episode of Let's Talk Funny was released today. I don't know if I can turn that down. Probably can't turn that down. I'll just put it in there. Oh, it's on mute. That's good. Got a lovely chance to spend some time with Terada. This is the Let's Talk Funny podcast, where every week I speak to a comedian about comedy. So I love comedy. I love stand-up comedy. I love the stand-up routines. I love all that kind of world. Never done stand-up comedy. Have worked a bit before in the world of comedy. I worked for Theatre Sports Auckland for quite a wee while. So this is a podcast. If you're watching us on YouTube, you might have already seen it popping across, but it's also on Apple Podcasts, and you can find it on Spotify as well. If you're someone like me and you are a listener to podcasts, that's what I typically do. Even if I've got something on YouTube, like I watch one called Two Bears, One Cave, and I typically watch it on YouTube, but I normally just listen to it with my headphones on. So if you're a listener to podcasts, then in fact, these kinds of podcasts are probably more listens, because there's not really any, I don't really put any, like there's no video or anything that really plays in it. Then I'd appreciate you guys, if you're interested, checking us out on Apple Podcasts, because a rate and a review is really important. We're trying to build something with this. We're going to do some work with the International Comedy Festival and maybe get some of their comedians on board as well. So go to Apple Podcasts and look up Let's Talk Funny. And in doing that, you'll hear some of New Zealand and hopefully the world's, if we get a bit more access, podcasts talking about comedy. So that's what the podcast is. And the beautiful thing about it is they're not topical, although I think in Radar's one we did talk a bit about Christopher Luxon, who made a comedy speech last week. But they're not topical, so I'm recording them in advance. So next week I already know is Michelle Acorn. And then after that, David Corrias actually messaged me the other day, said, shall I come on? I'm like, yes, come on, you're fantastic. So people are kind of getting to know it, and they're kind of booking themselves up in the future. So every Tuesday, 5 a.m. New Zealand time, a new episode uploads both to Apple, to Spotify, and to YouTube, and probably on Twitter as well. Actually, I'm not sure if it's on Twitter. Actually, is it on Twitter? I don't know. Anyway, I'm by myself, so I can do a little plug for myself, my other products. And that's it. And actually, speaking of other plugs, Department of Conversation, which is the Friday night show that plays in this time slot, Efiso Collins this week. We talk politics, long-form conversation, Department of Conversation with Efiso Collins this Friday night as well in this time slot. All right, guys, that's us. Thanks for joining us again. We appreciate you all. Love you to bits. Be safe, and we'll see you in about 23 hours. All the best.